She froze when the volunteer quietly pointed toward the entrance. Standing there in a tailored charcoal suit was one of the richest men in the country, a billionaire whose face had appeared on magazine covers for decades. His silver hair trembled in the afternoon breeze as tears filled his eyes. He wasn't staring at the crowded shelter. He was staring at the young woman serving soup with worn-out sneakers and patched sleeves. The spoon slipped from her hand when she recognized the faded family locket hanging from his shaking fingers. Then came the question that silenced the entire room and shattered 20 years of painful secrets. If she was really his granddaughter. What had happened to the $2 million he had placed into a trust fund for her future? Before we continue this unforgettable journey, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who believes in kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances, and subscribe to our channel so our community can continue bringing stories that remind us humanity still exists. Alastair Whitmore had built an empire that stretched across shipping companies, construction firms, and charitable foundations throughout Europe and North America. Newspapers admired his business instincts, but very few knew the private sorrow that had followed him for over 2 decades. His only daughter, Meredith, had vanished from his life after marrying against his wishes. Pride had poisoned every opportunity for reconciliation. Letters stopped arriving. Phone numbers changed. Time hardened both hearts until silence became permanent. When investigators later reported that Meredith had died from a sudden illness, every remaining trail leading to her husband and infant daughter had disappeared. Alastair spent years hiring investigators, searching records, funding private agencies, and following impossible leads. Every trail ended the same way. His granddaughter had simply vanished, unknown to him. Little Kora Ellison had never vanished at all. She had merely become invisible to the world. After Meredith's death, Kora's father, Gregory, spiraled into debt and addiction. The loving man Meredith had believed she could save disappeared beneath poor decisions and dangerous friendships. Bills piled up. The house was repossessed. Eventually Gregory abandoned his daughter outside a government office with nothing more than a backpack and a blanket before disappearing forever. Kora entered the foster care system believing every promise adults made would eventually be broken. She moved through homes where kindness was temporary and affection often depended upon government payments. Some foster families genuinely cared, but financial hardships forced placements to end. Others viewed children as little more than monthly income. Every time she unpacked her few belongings, she secretly hoped it would be the last move. It never was. The one treasure she refused to lose was a small silver locket containing a faded photograph of her mother smiling beneath a bright afternoon sky. Meredith had written a single sentence on the back before her death. "Never believe your worth depends on what you own." Those words became Kora's anchor. By 24, she worked 2 daytime jobs whenever employers would hire her. She cleaned offices in the early mornings, volunteered several afternoons each week at the community shelter, and accepted temporary warehouse shifts whenever available. Rising rent eventually forced her into the very shelter where she volunteered. Embarrassment tempted her to quit serving meals, but she couldn't ignore families arriving with frightened children who reminded her of herself. The shelter director, Margaret Holloway, often noticed that Kora quietly skipped her own lunch whenever supplies ran low. She insisted she wasn't hungry, yet Margaret frequently found her drinking water instead of eating. When questioned, Kora always smiled and changed the subject. Across the city, Alastair's life looked perfect from the outside. His companies reached record profits. His charitable donations made headlines. Awards decorated his office walls. Yet every afternoon he found himself studying the only surviving photograph of Meredith holding her infant daughter beneath the same silver locket Kora still carried. Everything changed during a routine visit to one of his charitable foundations supporting homeless shelters. Alastair insisted on visiting programs personally rather than simply signing checks. His advisors considered it excellent publicity. They never realized he secretly visited shelters because hope refused to die. Somewhere, somehow, he still believed he might recognize his granddaughter. When he stepped inside Margaret's shelter that bright afternoon, volunteers bustled between tables serving meals. Children colored pictures. Elderly guests laughed over coffee. Then he noticed the familiar locket resting against a young volunteer's sweater. Time stopped, the shape, the engraving, even the tiny scratch beside the clasp. His heartbeat pounded louder than the conversation surrounding him. Kora looked up, confused by the elderly stranger staring at her with overwhelming emotion. Margaret approached politely, introducing the billionaire donor visiting the shelter, but Alistair barely heard a word. His eyes remained fixed upon the locket. When Kora instinctively touched it, memories flooded his mind that he had commissioned that exact piece from a craftsman before Meredith's wedding. His trembling question escaped almost as a whisper. Where had she gotten the necklace? Kora explained that it had belonged to her mother's name, Meredith. Everything else disappeared, within hours. DNA testing was quietly arranged through Alistair's legal team. Kora cooperated, assuming the elderly man simply needed closure after decades of searching. 3 days later, the results confirmed what Alistair had already known inside his heart: she truly was his granddaughter. The reunion should have been joyful. Instead, another devastating discovery waited. While preparing legal documents to welcome Kora into the family, Alistair instructed his attorneys to transfer the trust fund he had established shortly after her birth. $2 million had been invested over 20 years earlier, intended exclusively for education, housing, and her future security. The attorney turned pale. The trust had already been emptied years before. Impossible. Only specific legal guardians could authorize withdrawals under carefully documented circumstances. Every document appeared legitimate. Every signature seemed valid. Every transfer had been approved, yet Kora had never received a single dollar. Confusion quickly transformed into determination. Forensic accountants began tracing every transaction. Each document led back to Gregory. During the chaotic months following Meredith's death, Gregory had presented forged medical declarations claiming Kora required expensive long-term treatment. Corrupt financial advisors had ignored warning signs while approving staged withdrawals. The money had quietly disappeared through fake companies, luxury purchases, gambling debts, and fraudulent investments. By the time authorities realized inconsistencies existed, Gregory had disappeared without a trace. The trust intended to protect a little girl had instead financed one man's destruction. When Alistair learned the full truth, grief nearly overwhelmed him. His granddaughter had slept inside shelters while her stolen future financed yachts, sports cars, and lavish vacations that no longer existed. Yet what broke him most wasn't the missing fortune. It was discovering Kora had never become bitter. She still volunteered, she still comforted frightened children, she still believed people deserved second chances, even after life repeatedly disappointed her. Alistair expected anger when he explained everything. Instead, tears quietly rolled down Kora's face as she stared through the shelter window toward children playing beneath warm afternoon sunshine. She wasn't crying over the money, she mourned the childhood it could have provided, the education, the stable home, the certainty that someone had been planning for her future all along. For the first time since Meredith's death, Alistair openly admitted his greatest regret, his pride. If he had forgiven his daughter sooner, if he had visited, if he had swallowed his stubbornness, perhaps none of this would have happened. The realization haunted him. Kora gently took his trembling hand. Neither spoke for several moments. Some wounds required silence more than words. Over the following weeks, Alistair refused to simply solve everything with money. He wanted to become family. Every afternoon they shared lunches together. He learned Kora loved restoring old books from thrift stores. She discovered her grandfather secretly painted landscapes whenever business pressures became overwhelming. They laughed over forgotten family stories preserved inside faded photo albums. Gradually, strangers became relatives. Alistair also refused to let the theft remain unresolved. Civil lawsuits recovered portions of Gregory's hidden assets through properties purchased under false identities. Several professionals who ignored obvious warning signs lost their licenses after investigations exposed years of negligence. Although most of the original trust remained unrecoverable, justice finally acknowledged the wrong committed against Kora. Then Alistair surprised everyone. Instead of simply replacing the missing money, he established an entirely new foundation bearing Meredith's name. Its mission was simple: every young adult aging out of foster care would receive financial guidance, housing assistance, scholarships, and emotional mentorship so fewer lives would slip through society's cracks. When journalists praised Alistair's generosity, He redirected every compliment toward his granddaughter. He explained that wealth means very little if it arrives too late for the people who needed love first. Kora accepted a leadership role within the foundation, using her own experiences to redesign programs from the perspective of someone who had actually survived the foster system. Policies changed because she understood problems statistics never revealed. Children trusted her because they recognized someone who truly understood loneliness. Months later, during another bright afternoon at the same shelter where everything had begun, Kora stood beside Margaret serving meals once again. The only difference was that she no longer needed the shelter herself. She returned because gratitude had become part of who she was. A little girl nervously asked whether life ever became better after losing everything. Kora smiled with quiet confidence. She placed an extra piece of bread beside the child's bowl and gently squeezed her shoulder. Sometimes life gives back something greater than what it took, not always money, sometimes family, sometimes purpose, sometimes the chance to become the person you once desperately needed. Watching from nearby, Alistair wiped away tears. He no longer tried to hide that he had searched across continents believing he was looking for a missing granddaughter. Instead, he had found the missing part of his own heart. The mansion he once considered his greatest achievement suddenly felt insignificant compared to the laughter echoing through a community shelter on an ordinary afternoon. Before we reach the end of this story, we'd love to hear from you. Please leave a meaningful comment sharing whether you believe forgiveness can heal even the deepest family wounds, or whether you think some mistakes can never truly be undone. As another sunny afternoon painted golden light across the shelter windows, grandfather and granddaughter walked side by side, not toward unimaginable luxury, but toward a future built on trust, compassion, and the promise that broken families can still find their way back to one another. The stolen fortune had nearly erased hope, but kindness restored something far more valuable than $2 million. It restored a family, honored a mother's memory, and proved that the richest inheritance anyone can receive is unconditional love shared before it's too late. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey.